What's going on, ProGuides fam? It's your host Kangas, and welcome back to the third week of Improvement Saturdays, where we break down a key concept of tactical FPS games so we can all better understand Valorant at a high level. Today's concept should sound kind of familiar, but can also be a little vague, and that's game sense. We all know about the term, but few ever really define it. Good players all seem to have it, but it's never something that they train like aim or crosshair placement or even positioning. So today we're going to break down the concept of game sense and then build it back up logically so we can all understand what it is and how to improve it. So hit that sub button and let's get into this. And of course, if you ever want to speed up your improvement, whether it's in game sense or really any other skill in the game, make sure to come visit us at ProGuides.com, where our Immortal and Radiant level coaches are more than happy to help you implement your knowledge into actual practice. We also teamed up with pro players like Sentinels 10s and Team Liquid Scream to bring you courses that will help you master the fundamentals and specialize in roles like the Duelist. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, make sure to come check us out. So like all other concepts that we've covered in the past, we need to first understand what game sense is fundamentally. From an abstract perspective, game sense is at its core the level of logical understanding that you have over the game's state. But in simpler terms, it's just the degree of situational awareness that you have combined with your deductive reasoning at any given moment during a game of Valorant. By having good game sense, you have a greater awareness of what's happening on the map, therefore allowing you to make well-informed decisions that increase your odds of winning. Although game sense is a skill that's often hard to notice directly, it's a skill that's always in play whether you realize it or not. Whether it's to position yourself for a kill or to push an area that you know will win you the round, game sense is the all-encompassing concept that determines how and why we make decisions in game. From a practical view, game sense plays out in many ways. Perhaps it's understanding rotations when you're trying to lurk, or it could be deducing the enemy's position during a clutch, or it could even be realizing that an enemy's execute is a fake. In each of these situations, we can all see how game sense could give you advantages. If you know where the enemy is rotating, you can push into areas of the map that they aren't defending, or catch a rotator trying to assist his teammates. If you can deduce the enemy's positioning, then you can find the best position to catch them off guard, or structure your clutch so that you can isolate each enemy for 1v1s. If you find out that an enemy's execute is fake very quickly, your team could rotate early onto the site that the enemy is really targeting. You see where I'm going with all this, right? Having amazing game sense is like having an internal wall hack in your brain that tells you exactly where enemies are. And if you know the enemy's positions or rotations, then abusing them is a matter of knowing where to be and when. So to better demonstrate why game sense is important, I'm gonna have to pull out some economics and game theory terms to explain a fundamental aspect of tactical FPS games: information. Tactical FPS games like Valorant are what is known in game theory as a game with imperfect information. That is to say that as players, we do not have access to every piece of information on everything that's happening in the game. An example of a game with perfect information would be chess, or something basic like tic-tac-toe. In these games, I am always 100% aware of everything that's happening in the game because the information is clear for both players. In these games, there are objectively good moves because both players know exactly how the game is progressing. However, in Valorant and other competitive games like CSGO or League of Legends, this is not the case. For example, I cannot possibly confirm where the enemy is moving because I can only see what's in front of me. So in context, it could be the best move ever to walk into the site, or potentially the worst, depending on whether my opponent is there to catch me or not. So that's why information plays such a big role. If I know that the enemy is not there, then I can enter the site for free. And if he knew that there's no one contesting his site, then they would be better off defending another site. In games with imperfect information, having more information than the enemy gives you an advantage, as that lets you dictate the direction of the round with much more clarity. But obviously, information is useless unless you actually know how to work with it. So in that same regard, game sense is a result of understanding information and how it can be used to best help you achieve your goal. One thing that's always been associated with game sense is that it carries this kind of vague characterization of being almost like a sixth sense, or an intuitive feeling that cannot be trained through anything other than just playing the game for hours on end. Now I'm gonna try and tell you that this is true to an extent, but is actually a myth that doesn't hold true in most situations. So as a quick roadmap for the next section, we'll be covering why this isn't true fundamentally, what it actually is, and how we can go about improving game sense specifically. So first of all, game sense, like most other sense words, are subjective and is often hard to pinpoint exactly. Sort of like when you say something tastes good, you get an idea of what that is as a concept, but don't know the exact reasoning behind it. That's why more often than not, it's more easily described by an intuitive feeling rather than a sustained effort to remain aware of possibilities, as well as using past experiences. You know how when you get very good at something, it no longer takes as much mental energy to do it properly, right? For example, when you start off learning an agent, you're probably fumbling with their abilities and having to think about how to use them and when to use them. But as you gain experience, you start to become more comfortable with pulling them out and using them as you see fit, and the mental aspect of that takes a backseat when playing. It's not that using your abilities doesn't take mental consideration, but more that you've already created a mental set of rules that give you an idea of when you can and cannot use that ability. This is the same with game sense. As you become a better player, certain situations that you run into become easier to deal with because you have experienced that situation before. But that doesn't mean that you didn't put in the proper mental effort to understand what is happening. It just means that you know a lot more about the situation already through consideration from the past. Sort of like, if I know 2 + 2 = 4, then the next time I see 2 + 2, I don't even need to think about adding them to know that the answer is 4. If you run into a situation that you've already solved or found great success approaching in a certain way, then you don't need to think about how to solve it. You just intuitively understand how to approach it. So intuition drives good game sense in a way, but it's not the first step. The first step is solving the problem at hand, or in other words, coming up with a solution to whatever situation you find yourself in during a game. This is where awareness and deductive reasoning come into play. So before we continue, I want to quickly cover our question of the day. Today's question is kind of related to our topic at hand. How do you approach each round in Valorant? Do you go based on feeling or logic, or do you just like to go with the flow and see how things turn out? For me, I try to always rely on logic to determine my next decision, but if I don't have any meaningful reads on the game, then I usually just let my gut instinct tell me what to do and then just kind of see how it turns out. Also, I'm a Killjoy main, so if I'm on defenders, my brain usually turns off anyway. But let me know your answers in the comments down below. We love reading them. So to continue on my point of deductive reasoning from before, the backbone of problem solving is logic. To get a definitive answer, you have to have logical reasoning to support why you do it. Whenever something is successful, there's always a logical reason behind it, and since problem solving is a large part of building up a powerful game sense, logic always plays a massive role in game sense as well. To some of you, this may seem obvious, and truthfully, it really is. Logic is more or less what drives everything that we do after all. Yet when people say that game sense is more about awareness or intuition, it sort of leads people away from considering the most basic principle that everything about game sense is logical. So once you come to that insight, game sense becomes something much easier to work with and also not as vague of a topic as before. Oh, and a quick side note here, one thing that is a common theme for each of our past Improvement Saturday videos, and also will be for future videos, is the idea of being aware of the different factors in your own play. If you aren't aware of the mechanics of the game, then you have less ability to make a logical and intentional effort to understand your weaknesses and strengths or decisions. In almost the same way that game sense plays a huge role in your success as a player in any given situation, awareness plays a similar role in how you use logic to approach improving as a player. In fact, this exact point leads us to why logic plays a huge role in the information game. Being logical and objective while playing is a big contributor to consistent improvement and heightened knowledge in Valorant. Although I would say that trying to think too much and overthinking can hurt your play, the act of logically considering your situation is often very important for providing structure in how you approach them. Logic plays into game sense by creating the information that you need to make your decisions, which is to say game sense is just using that logic. Being able to consistently find a play that gives you the best odds of winning relies on taking the information that you have and what you can logically deduce with it and coming up with a game plan. Your level of logical reasoning, or game sense as a more specific term, not only lets you craft that game plan faster and potentially win you the round, but also increases the amount of information that you can deduce from the info that you're given. That was a lot of words, so let's put this into an example. Let's say that I'm in a post-plant situation. I see that the enemy is retaking very slowly and hasn't moved up at all. What does that tell you? For someone with less game sense, probably nothing. Maybe they're just saving. For somebody with moderate game sense, they could maybe smell something fishy or think that the enemy might be coordinating something big. But for somebody with strong game sense, this is a large red flag for a flank. Since the enemy's taking their time, they are either trying to gather up players to make a coordinated push or to wait for another factor to come into play before making their move. In many cases, this means that someone's trying to flank and is telling their team to not die. Someone with good game sense would notice the enemy's movement and come up with a different situation that could be happening and then play accordingly. So when the flanker comes in, you catch them slacking because they think that they read the enemy. And even if there's no flanker, you're positioned in a way that accounts for the possibility of a flank, therefore removing the possibility of being punished by that flanker. Even if the flanker never comes, the level of awareness necessary to play in a way that is conscious of the flank potential while also setting yourself up to play post-plant is often hard to notice unless you already have that good game sense. This is also why game sense is harder to train for newer players, as you just don't know what you don't know. So knowing that now, how does a newer player approach training their game sense? As we said earlier, awareness is key. The goal of this video so far has been to demonstrate what game sense is fundamentally, so now that you're aware of that, training game sense is no longer constrained to just playing games and hoping that you become instinctively better. The way to get better at game sense is to approach each situation as logically as possible and also understand the different factors that affected how the scenario played out. One great way to train your game sense is to think back on a situation and consider how it could turn out differently if you changed your reaction to it, or to think back on a situation and consider what decisions would have just been better. But for those that want something more conceptually rooted, let's talk about another game theory concept of decision trees. Essentially, it's a list of decisions that branch out into responses that branch out into more decisions, and so on. Basically, this means if I do this, then what happens? After you figure out what can happen, you then think, if they respond with this, then what can I do to counter it? Going down this branching path of logic is an immensely helpful way of training your logical reasoning and understanding how people react to your decisions. But of course, this still means that you want to play games to test out your logic or even find out what people do to counter your decisions. And another great way is to just watch professional VODs or even watch better players' VODs and try to work out why they make certain decisions and how it impacts the round. And on that note, Riot, please implement a replay system. It would really help. Game sense is a massive part of the game that's honestly too often left up to the imagination. By making this video, our goal was to help you understand what game sense really means, as well as how it factors into your decision making and improvement. At the same time, we really wanted to make it comprehensive so that you can watch this again in the future and understand more about game sense each time. What do you think? We love hearing your feedback, as these guide videos have kind of been hit or miss with our audience lately, so if you did enjoy it, let us know in the comments below. And also don't forget to like the video and sub so that you can keep up with all the latest Valorant news and guides, as well as these weekly improvement videos. That's it for today, so best of luck on the grind, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.